The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly like what would happen if someone asked a committee of aliens to design the most unnecessarily dramatic meeting room in the universe. Floating crystals provided mood lighting, holographic displays showed absolutely nothing useful, and the chairs were designed for at least 17 different body types, none of which looked remotely comfortable. High Chancellor Vex Mara, a being who resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a tax auditor, tapped her ceremonial gavel against the quantum podium. The sound echoed through the chamber with the kind of artificial importance that screamed, "We take ourselves very seriously here." "Order, order," she declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no in approximately 4 centuries. Today's agenda concerns the primitive planet designated Earth 3. Ambassador Glitch, representing the silicon-based collective, raised one of his mechanical appendages. He looked like someone had asked a toaster to cosplay as a diplomat. "High Chancellor, our preliminary scans indicate this planet houses numerous savage species. But surely this is beneath our attention?" "Ah, but that's precisely the issue," Vex Mara replied, her compound eyes gleaming with the kind of bureaucratic excitement that preceded terrible decisions. "Our xenobiological surveys have identified multiple apex predators on this world. We need to determine which beast truly rules their ecosystem before we can properly classify the planet." The chamber buzzed with the alien equivalent of interested murmuring. It sounded like a broken air conditioning unit having an argument with a dying modem. Counselor Thrax, a purple blob who somehow managed to look perpetually condescending despite having no discernible facial features, wobbled forward. "High Chancellor, surely any species capable of space travel would have already contacted us. These Earth creatures are clearly primitive." "Exactly my point," Vex Mara said, spreading her arms wide in a gesture that was probably meant to be dramatic but looked more like she was trying to dry her armpits. "We need to study their dominant predators to understand their hierarchy. Knowledge is power, and power is, well, also power." The logic was flawless by Galactic Council standards, which meant it made absolutely no sense to anyone with functioning brain cells. "I propose we send a research team," announced Dr. Clix Knox, the Council's chief xenobiologist. He was a tall, gray being with enormous black eyes who looked like he'd been designed by someone who had only heard descriptions of aliens secondhand. "We'll observe their apex predators in their natural habitat and determine which species holds dominance." "Brilliant," Vex Mara declared, banging her gavel again. "Who shall we send?" "I recommend Commander Blorf for military expertise, Science Officer Kleep for technical analysis, and Junior Researcher Zot for, well, someone has to carry the equipment." The chamber erupted in the alien equivalent of applause, which sounded like a dolphin trapped in a bubble wrap factory. "Excellent," Vex Mara announced. "They'll deploy immediately to study Earth's savage beasts. I'm sure this simple reconnaissance mission will proceed without any complications whatsoever." And with that statement, the Galactic Council managed to demonstrate why their empire had been declining for the past millennium. They had just decided to study Earth's apex predators without once considering that maybe, just maybe, they should check if any of those primitive creatures had developed things like technology, space travel, or the ability to monitor alien communications. But hey, what could possibly go wrong? Dr. Maya Rodriguez was having the kind of morning that made her question her life choices. She sat in her remote cabin in the Montana wilderness, surrounded by enough high-tech equipment to make NASA jealous, drinking coffee that could probably power a small spacecraft, and listening to alien chatter through her homemade signal interceptor. Most people would find this setup either fascinating or deeply concerning. Maya found it Tuesday. "Oh, this is rich," she muttered, adjusting the frequency on her alien communication array. The device looked like what would happen if a satellite dish had a baby with a disco ball and raised it on a steady diet of science fiction movies. "They think we're primitive." She'd been monitoring Galactic Council communications for 8 months now, ever since she'd accidentally picked up their signals while trying to contact the International Space Station. It turned out that aliens were exactly as bureaucratic and pompous as human government officials, except with worse fashion sense and an alarming tendency to make decisions based on incomplete data. "Let me get this straight," Maya said to her cat, Professor Whiskers, who was demonstrating his apex predator status by being thoroughly defeated by a piece of string. They want to study Earth's dominant species, but they're looking for savage beasts instead of, oh, I don't know, the species that built cities and invented the internet? Professor Whiskers meowed in response, which Maya chose to interpret as humans are clearly superior to these alien idiots. Maya had 3 PhDs in xenobiology, astrobiology, and theoretical physics, plus a master's degree in what she liked to call making aliens look stupid. She'd spent her career preparing for first contact, imagining all the ways humanity would impress advanced alien civilizations with our art, culture, and scientific achievements. Instead, she'd discovered that aliens were about as observant as a goldfish wearing sunglasses. "They're sending a research team," she announced to her empty cabin, because talking to yourself was perfectly normal when you were the only human who knew aliens existed. Commander Blorf, Science Officer Kleep, and Junior Researcher Zot. Seriously, did they name these guys by throwing alphabet soup at a wall? She pulled up her encrypted files on Galactic Council species. The photos made her snort with laughter. Commander Blorf looked like a rejected concept design for a sci-fi movie villain. Science Officer Kleep resembled a walking mushroom with delusions of grandeur. And Junior Researcher Zot looked exactly like what would happen if someone asked a child to draw an alien and gave them only green crayons. "They want to study our apex predators," Maya mused, watching Professor Whiskers lose a battle with his own tail. Well, who am I to disappoint them? A wicked grin spread across her face. Maya had always been told she had a twisted sense of humor, usually right before she proved someone spectacularly wrong about something they claimed to be experts on. This was going to be fun. She spent the next hour setting up what she generously called research scenarios around her property. A few strategically placed cameras, some motion sensors, and a lot of props that would make any Hollywood special effects team weep with envy. "If they want to study savage beasts," she announced to Professor Whiskers, "then by God, I'm going to show them some savage beasts." The cat yawned and knocked over her coffee mug, demonstrating exactly why aliens might be confused about Earth's power structure. Maya grabbed her tablet and started planning the greatest practical joke in interstellar history. 3 days later, Maya was awakened by the sound of what could only be described as a cosmic garbage truck having a midlife crisis. She peered through her window to see a spacecraft that looked like it had been designed by someone who had seen pictures of flying saucers but was working from memory and possibly under the influence of mind-altering substances. Well, she muttered, pulling on her hiking boots. "The circus has come to town." The ship landed with all the grace of a drunk elephant attempting ballet, leaving a perfectly circular scorch mark in her meadow. 3 figures emerged, and Maya had to bite her lip to keep from laughing out loud. Commander Blorf stood about 7 feet tall and looked like someone had crossed a bodybuilder with a traffic cone. His idea of military bearing apparently involved standing so rigidly that he resembled a confused scarecrow. Science Officer Kleep was exactly as mushroom-like as Maya had expected, complete with a cap that made him look like he belonged in a salad rather than a research team. Junior Researcher Zot was the most humanoid of the 3, if you ignored his green skin, 4 arms, and the fact that he kept dropping things. Maya grabbed her "I'm definitely not the dominant species" disguise, which consisted of torn clothes, fake dirt, and her best impression of someone who had never seen technology before. "Oh no," she called out, stumbling into the clearing while wringing her hands dramatically. "Please don't hurt me, mighty sky beings." Commander Blorf turned toward her, his chest puffing out like a balloon animal someone had inflated too enthusiastically. "Primitive creature, we mean you no harm. We are here to study your planet's apex predators." "Apex predators?" Maya gasped, playing up her supposed terror. "Oh, you mean the rulers. The terrible beasts that govern our world." Science Officer Kleep pulled out what looked like a tablet crossed with a disco ball. "Fascinating. This primitive specimen appears to have some form of language." "I'm not a specimen," Maya protested weakly. "I'm just a humble servant of the great beasts. My name is, Mary." She'd panicked and given them the most generic name she could think of. "Sue her." "Mary," Commander Blorf repeated, managing to make it sound like he was announcing the discovery of a new planet. We require your assistance in locating these great beasts. Oh, I couldn't possibly, Maya said, wringing her hands even more dramatically. The fur lords and the feathered tyrants forbid us from revealing their secrets to outsiders. Junior researcher Zot dropped his scanner for the third time and scrambled to pick it up. Commander, the readings are off the charts. This planet has an incredibly complex ecosystem. Off the charts because you keep dropping the scanner, Zot, Kleep muttered. Maya had to cough to cover a laugh. I suppose I could guide you, but only if you promise not to anger the great beasts. They have terrible powers. What kind of powers? Blorf demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never met a housecat. The small fur lords can see in the dark and move without sound. The feathered tyrants can fly and have razor-sharp talons. And the great swimmers, they rule the lakes and streams with iron fins. She was describing cats, birds, and fish, but the aliens nodded sagely as if she'd just revealed the secrets of the universe. Remarkable, Kleep whispered. A planet ruled by multiple apex predator species. The scientific implications are staggering. Maya led them toward her cabin, pointing out signs of the great beasts along the way. A few strategically placed cat toys became offerings to the fur lords. Bird droppings became territorial markings of the feathered tyrants. And a small pond became a sacred site where the great swimmers hold court. We must observe these creatures, Blorf declared. Mary, can you arrange a meeting with your rulers? Maya pretended to look terrified. A meeting? Oh no, that would be far too dangerous. But perhaps I could arrange for you to observe them from a safe distance. Perfect, Kleep said, already pulling out more equipment. We'll document everything. As they approached her cabin, Maya caught sight of Professor Whiskers lounging on the porch, but completely oblivious to the fact that he was about to become the star of the greatest interstellar hoax in history. Behold, Maya whispered dramatically. One of the fur lords approaches. Professor Whiskers chose that exact moment to demonstrate why cats were allegedly Earth's rulers, by doing absolutely nothing impressive whatsoever. He stretched, yawned, and then proceeded to lick his own butt with the kind of dedication usually reserved for important scientific research. The three aliens immediately dropped to what Maya assumed were their knees, though with their anatomy it was hard to tell. Magnificent, Blorf whispered, his voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences. Look at its predatory grace. Maya had to bite her tongue to keep from pointing out that Professor Whiskers was currently losing a battle with his own tail. Yes, the fur lords are very graceful. This one is called Professor Whiskers. He's a minor noble in the fur lord hierarchy. Professor Whiskers, Kleep repeated reverently, frantically taking notes. And what are his powers? He can see perfectly in complete darkness, Maya said, which was technically true. He moves without making a sound, can leap incredible distances, and has retractable claws that can cut through, fabric and furniture. All of this was absolutely true about cats, but the way Maya said it made Professor Whiskers sound like a furry ninja assassin. The claws, Zot gasped, dropping his scanner again. Are they poisonous? Worse, Maya said with theatrical horror. They carry bacteria that can cause terrible infections. And if you anger a fur lord, they'll leave dead rodents on your doorstep as a warning. This was also technically true, though Maya conveniently left out that it was usually meant as a gift. Professor Whiskers chose that moment to demonstrate his apex predator status by falling off the porch while trying to catch a butterfly. The aliens interpreted this as a tactical retreat to higher ground for better surveillance. Incredible hunting instincts, Blorf observed. Next, Maya led them to observe the feathered tyrants, which turned out to be a family of perfectly ordinary robins who had built a nest near her cabin. She'd spent the morning scattering birdseed to ensure they'd be active. The feathered tyrants control the airways, Maya explained as the robins pecked at seeds. They have aerial surveillance capabilities and can coordinate attacks across vast distances. Axe? Kleep asked, his mushroom cap quivering with excitement. Oh yes, Maya said gravely. They dive bomb from above, using their beaks as weapons. And they have a sophisticated communication system. Listen. The robins were chirping cheerfully, but Maya made it sound like they were planning military operations. That's their war song, she whispered. They're discussing territory boundaries. The aliens spent an hour documenting the aggressive territorial behavior of robins eating breakfast. But the piece de resistance came when Maya led them to the pond to observe the great swimmers. She'd prepared for this by stocking the pond with goldfish and explaining that these were the scouts of the aquatic empire. The great swimmers are the most mysterious of Earth's rulers, she explained as the goldfish swam in lazy circles. They control all water sources and can survive in environments that would kill other species. They're so sleek, Zod observed, watching a goldfish bump into a rock. Such perfect hydrodynamic design. And notice how they never sleep, Maya added. They maintain constant vigilance. The fact that fish don't have eyelids was apparently the most terrifying thing the aliens had ever heard. How do humans survive under such oppressive rule? Blorf asked. Maya hung her head in mock shame. We serve them faithfully. We provide the fur lords with comfortable sleeping places and food. We scatter seeds for the feathered tyrants and maintain clean water for the great swimmers. In exchange, they allow us to exist. Fascinating, Cleet muttered, recording everything. A planet where the intelligent species serves as caretakers for the true rulers. The council will be amazed. Sometimes, Maya continued, really warming to her theme, if we're very good, the fur lords will make a rumbling sound to show approval. And occasionally a feathered tyrant will build a nest near our homes as a sign of protection. She was describing purring cats and nesting birds, but the aliens nodded as if she'd just explained the most complex political system in the galaxy. The rumbling sound, Blorf said urgently. Can you make Professor Whiskers produce it? Maya looked at her cat, who was now attacking a dandelion with the fierce determination of a warrior facing his greatest enemy. I could try. But it requires a sacred ritual. She proceeded to demonstrate the ancient art of petting a cat, which caused Professor Whiskers to purr loud enough to be heard across the clearing. All three aliens immediately prostrated themselves before the purring cat. The great fur lord approves of your presence, Maya announced solemnly. It was at this moment that Maya realized she might have taken the joke a little too far. Maya watched the three aliens spend their third day documenting Professor Whiskers' advanced hunting techniques, which currently involved him being completely baffled by a laser pointer. The sight of grown beings from an advanced spacefaring civilization taking detailed notes about a cat chasing a red dot was both hilarious and deeply concerning. This is getting ridiculous, she muttered to herself, watching Zot frantically scribble observations about the mystical red prey orb that phases in and out of existence. The final straw came when Commander Blorf asked her to demonstrate the submission ritual humans performed for the fur lords. He wanted to know how humans showed proper respect to their rulers. Maya realized she was about to watch three aliens try to serve food to a cat in tiny bowls while making what they thought were appropriately respectful bowing motions. Okay, stop, she said, her voice carrying a tone of authority that made all three aliens freeze mid-bow. Just stop. Have we offended the great fur lord? Cleep asked in panic. No, you haven't offended Professor Whiskers, Maya said, walking over to her cat and scratching behind his ears. You've offended me. We don't understand, Blorf said, confusion evident in his voice. Maya looked at the three aliens, realized they were still kneeling, and felt a mixture of amusement and second-hand embarrassment that was almost physically painful. Stand up, she commanded. All of you, stand up and listen. Something in her tone made them obey immediately, which was the first sign that maybe they weren't as obtuse as they appeared. My name isn't Mary, Maya began, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's Dr. Maya Rodriguez. I have 3 PhDs in xenobiology, astrobiology, and theoretical physics. I've been monitoring your communications for 8 months, and I've been lying to you for 3 days. The aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both confusion and dawning horror. Professor Whiskers isn't a ruler, Maya continued. gesturing to her cat, who was now cleaning his paws with the kind of focus that suggested he'd missed the entire conversation. He's a pet, a companion animal. Those robins aren't tyrants, they're just birds trying to raise their babies. And those goldfish aren't aquatic overlords, they're decorative fish I bought at a pet store. But the complex behaviors, Kleep stammered. The territorial displays, the communication systems, are completely normal animal behaviors that exist on every planet with complex ecosystems, Maya said, her voice taking on the tone she'd used when lecturing particularly slow students. You came here looking for savage beasts and apex predators, and you found them. You just didn't recognize them. She walked over to her cabin and emerged with a tablet, pulling up images of human cities, space stations, and technology. These are our cities, she said, showing them pictures of New York, Tokyo, and London. These are our spacecraft. These are our scientific instruments. We've been to our moon, we've sent probes to other planets, and we've been listening to your radio chatter for decades. The three aliens stared at the images with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who had just realized they'd been wearing their underwear on the outside. You want to know about Earth's apex predator? Maya asked, her voice rising with each word. You want to know which species rules this planet? She stood up straight, her 5'6" frame somehow seeming to tower over the 7-foot-tall Commander Blorf. You asked which beast ruled Earth, she said, her voice carrying the weight of an entire species' dignity. I simply raised my hand. The silence that followed was broken only by Professor Whiskers, who chose that moment to cough up a hairball, as if to punctuate the revelation with the kind of timing that only cats possessed. Humans, Maya continued, are the dominant species on this planet. We domesticated these animals thousands of years ago. We keep them as companions, not rulers. We've shaped this entire planet's ecosystem to suit our needs. We've eliminated diseases, extended our lifespans, and created technologies that would make your Galactic Council weep with envy. She paused, letting that sink in. And you three, she said with a smile that was equal parts amused and terrifying, just spent 3 days bowing to my cat. Zot dropped his scanner one final time, but this time nobody bothered to pick it up. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened with the kind of panicked urgency usually reserved for galactic wars or the discovery that someone had been embezzling from the coffee fund. High Chancellor Vex Mara paced behind her podium, her compound eyes darting between the 3 research team members who stood before her like students who had just been caught cheating on the most important test in the galaxy. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Vex Mara said, her voice carrying the tone of someone who was trying very hard not to scream. You spent 3 days bowing to a small furry creature. Commander Blorf, who had somehow managed to look even more rigid than usual, cleared his throat. High Chancellor. The creature exhibited clear signs of advanced intelligence and predatory capabilities. It was chasing a red dot, Science Officer Kleep added helpfully. A mystical red dot that could phase in and out of existence, Zot clarified, which somehow made it worse. The chamber erupted in the alien equivalent of confused murmuring, which sounded like a broken translation program trying to process a foreign language while having a nervous breakdown. And the actual dominant species, Vex Mara continued, the humans were there the entire time? Dr. Maya Rodriguez was observing us, Blorf admitted. She has 3 advanced degrees and has been monitoring our communications for 8 months. 8 months? Ambassador Glitch's mechanical voice reached a pitch that threatened to shatter nearby crystals. She's been listening to our classified communications for 8 months? Apparently, Kleep said, consulting his notes with the dedication of someone who was determined to document every detail of his own humiliation. Human technology is more advanced than our initial scans indicated. Counselor Thrax wobbled forward, his purple form quivering with what Maya would have recognized as barely contained panic. What exactly did you tell her about our capabilities? The 3 team members exchanged the kind of glances that suggested they had just realized they might have committed the interstellar equivalent of showing up to a formal dinner wearing pajamas. We may have mentioned our faster-than-light travel capabilities, Blorf said slowly. Our planetary defense systems, Kleep added. And our trade routes, Zod finished, dropping his notes for emphasis. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop, if pins existed in space and made sound in a vacuum. So, Vex, Mara said, her voice now carrying the kind of calm that preceded spectacular meltdowns. We have a species that we classified as primitive, who have been monitoring our communications, who possess advanced technology, and who now know everything about our military and economic capabilities. That's technically accurate, Blorf admitted. And they've been letting us make fools of ourselves for entertainment? Dr. Rodriguez did seem to find our research methods amusing, Kleep said, which was possibly the understatement of the millennium. Back on Earth, Maya was sitting on her porch, watching the sunset and listening to the panicked chatter from the Galactic Council through her communication array. Professor Whiskers was curled up in her lap, purring contentedly and completely oblivious to the fact that he had just caused an interstellar diplomatic incident. You know what the funny thing is? Maya said to her cat, who opened one eye to acknowledge her before going back to sleep. They're probably going to spend the next 10 years trying to figure out if we're a threat, when all we really want is to be left alone to develop our technology and occasionally laugh at aliens who think housecats are apex predators. She took a sip of her coffee and smiled at the increasingly frantic alien chatter. I mean, seriously, she continued, any species that can be fooled by a cat playing with a laser pointer probably isn't ready for first contact anyway. Maybe in another few hundred years when they've figured out basic observation skills. Professor Whiskers opened both eyes and gave her a look that clearly said, are you going to keep talking, or are you going to provide more of those excellent chin scratches? You're right, Maya said, obliging him with the requested chin scratches. I should probably send them a formal diplomatic message, something professional and appropriate for interstellar relations. She reached for her tablet and composed a brief message to the Galactic Council. To whom it may concern, thank you for the entertaining visit. Professor Whiskers enjoyed meeting your research team. If you'd like to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth, please contact the United Nations rather than randomly landing in my backyard. Also, next time you want to study apex predators, maybe start with something that doesn't sleep 18 hours a day. Sincerely, Dr. Maya Rodriguez, unofficial Earth ambassador to confused aliens. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, listening to the sound of an entire galactic government having a collective nervous breakdown. Well, Professor Whiskers, she said to her cat, I think we've officially made first contact. How does it feel to be the most feared predator in the galaxy? Professor Whiskers yawned, stretched, and promptly fell asleep, which Maya chose to interpret as just another day ruling the universe. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Galactic Council was learning the most important lesson in interstellar relations. Never underestimate a species that keeps apex predators as pets and has a sense of humor about it.